Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the internet, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here on my YouTube channel. I had a little bit of a misfire. I swear to God, that never happens, miss. I had a little bit of a misfire a little bit earlier. Sorry about that, but now we got the show up and running here, and I'm so glad you're joining me here today as we talk about a whole crap load of stuff. I mean, besides the fact that we're talking about Al Pacino has joined the new Quentin Tarantino movie. That cast is looking really impressive, a whole bunch of other stuff. But before we get to any of that, let's go right off the top with this. Now, as many of you guys know, a brand new Halloween film has been in the works, and I quite honestly have not been interested. I haven't cared about, the new set pictures. I'm not a fan of the Halloween franchise or anything like that. So it's not that I hated the idea of it, it's just I haven't cared. And then today, the first trailer for the new Halloween film dropped online. And you know what? Here's what I always say. The job of a trailer is to take your interest level, wherever it is, no matter how high or high low it is, and raise it up a couple of notches. If that's the job of a trailer, then mission accomplished for the trailer of Halloween, because I am now on board with the Halloween movie. I love the feel. I love the fact that they're going with the idea of two hunters. Because Jamie Lee Curtis, the way she's portrayed in this trailer, she is a hunter. She is not some helpless victim trying to escape and trying to be saved from the big mean man coming. And I love the way they set up with him in prison. I was wondering if they were going to be able to really nail that aspect. Because I've been saying, this one just pretends all the other Halloween movies don't exist except the first one. Like, can you pull that off? Just in this trailer, they showed and proved that they have pulled it off. I instantly forgot about every other Halloween movie except for the first one. I bought into this, the setting it up of a hunter versus a hunter. Two hunters hunting each other in Mike and Jamie Lee Curtis. I was completely into it. Now, there's a few cheeseball things in the trailer as well, like the bearded dude who goes there to research Myers. It didn't work so much for me, that character, whatever. But aside from that, it really got me going. I felt the tension. It felt like Jamie Lee Curtis's character has been preparing for this moment. Like, I know no one else is going to talk about this, but this moment in the trailer where she throws a switch and the kitchen counter moves and she goes down to the sub-level basement, I'm like, that's awesome. That's awesome. And remember, I'm the guy for all these months who's been going I don't care about a Halloween movie. I do not care. I don't care. This trailer got me on board, man. It looks like it's really going to pay homage to the original mythology. It feels like they've progressed these characters at the same time. They didn't try to make Jamie Lee Curtis up to look like she's still 30 years old. I mean, which only adds to the badassness, I think, of the appearance of the character. Hey guys, look, you know me, I just call it as I see it, whether you like what I'm seeing or not. But hey, I'm on board now. This trailer is taking me from being somebody who did not care two shits about a Halloween movie to now somebody that I'm looking forward to this movie and I'm excited. Now, again, we've all seen plenty of great trailers to horrible movies. This movie may suck, but as far as just talking about the trailer goes, trailer did its job and did it well. All right, let's talk about the next thing off the top here. Now, as many of you guys know, there's a brand new Creed 2 movie coming. Now, of course, Ryan Coogler's not directing this one. That's fine. But all the other major players are still on board. And it's just been reported that Creed 2 has officially wrapped production. It's now in the can. And everybody finished. There's a whole bunch of videos online of people celebrating at a wrap party and all that kind of stuff that they've wrapped production on this. And now the movie is well on schedule to come out in November. Now, I remember a bunch of people saying when they announced they were just starting shooting just 2 months ago, that they were beginning shooting the movie and that it was coming out in November. But he said, wait, that's rushing it. It's never going to be in time. And I'm like, whoa. Just remember, this is not one of these visually effects heavy movies. This isn't a movie that's going to require a year of post-production. This is a movie they're probably going to shoot in about 8 to 12 weeks. And then have just regular little post-production to do. This movie will be ready in plenty of time. Plenty of time. There was no rush on this thing whatsoever. I think there's a misnomer out there that any Hollywood film takes 3 years to make or something like that. Not the case. A film like this, you can shoot, do post-production all within 7 or 8 months. As long as you got your script where you want it to be and you've done all your homework, you should be able to be good to go. And I think that's what they've done here. So I'm looking forward to this. Did you guys see the story, by the way? that Sylvester Stallone was talking about how, remember the pet turtles in the original Rocky movie? Those turtles are still alive. And apparently Sylvester Stallone was just with them at the actual original house that they shot the original Rocky movie in. And now whether or not these turtles make an appearance in the movie or not, I'm not 100% sure. But if they do, it's going to be a little bit of a geek out moment. Because I remember, I was too young to watch Rocky when it first came out. But I remember the first time I saw Rocky, like seeing those turtles, like, oh, they're so cute. And like to see those exact same turtles is going to be a kick in the pants. So if you're watching Creed 2 and those two turtles do pop up, keep in mind, those are the original turtles from the original movie. All right, last thing off the top here is actually a whole bunch of stuff that's coming us from Matthew Vaughn. Now, of course, Matthew Vaughn is the guy who brought us the Kick-Ass movies. He brought us the Kingsman movies. And apparently he's talking now about doing a whole lot more of both. Now, apparently, Matthew Vaughn is saying that not only are they doing another Kick-Ass movie, they're talking about doing another Hit Girl movie as well. They're talking about doing another, like a part 3 to Kingsman, and then a Kingsman spin-off TV series, and a Statesman movie revolving around Channing Tatum and Jeff Bridges. Here's one of the exact quotes from the interview they did with Matthew Vaughn. Matthew Vaughn said this: Matthew Vaughn is planning a reboot of the action comedy Kick-Ass series and hinted that Patience Lee, the African-American single mother who assumes the vigilante mantle in Mark Millar's comics, would be the character primed to take center stage in the movie. Also in discussion is a standalone Hit Girl feature. We're going to reboot Kick-Ass, and Hit Girl, Vaughn said in the interview. And of course, he goes on to talk about doing another Kingsman, like a Kingsman 3, then some kind of 8-hour Kingsman TV series, and then a Statesman thing. All right, lots to talk about here. Let's start with the Kick-Ass thing. This is questionable. The first Kick-Ass movie at the box office didn't even make $100 million. I mean, it's weird to think about that because most of us kind of adore the first Kick-Ass movie, but it didn't even make $100 million. But a lot of people loved it, so you'd think the sequel's gonna make more money. The sequel only made $60 million at the box office. Not opening weekend, not domestically, worldwide. Kick-Ass 2 made $60 million at the box office. It took a 40% drop from the first one. Why? What studio would greenlight going back to that? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm happy. I'm a big fan of Matthew Vaughn. I'll go see it for sure. I liked Kick-Ass 2 for sure. But if you're a studio executive, how on earth do you greenlight this? Like, seriously, how do you greenlight that? The second one only made $60 million at the box office. Took a 40% drop from the previous one. That was already, like, it's one thing to say, oh, it took a 40% drop when the first one made $2 billion. Sure, then that's fine. A 40% drop when your first one only made less than $100 million, that's kind of crazy. Now, also not really clear is when they're talking about a Hit Girl film, is it going to be a aged up Hit Girl, like a Hit Girl who's now 18 or 19? Or is it going to be recasting and rebooting like the young 10-year-old, 12-year-old Hit Girl? Are they going to do that? Not really clear on that. Now, let's move on and talk about Statesman for a second. This one is interesting as well. I adore the first Statesman movie. Sorry, the first Kingsman movie. I absolutely adore the first Kingsman movie. I thought it was awesome. So excited for the sequel. I thought the sequel sucked. You know, I saw it for the first time and I thought, well, you know, the Golden Circle talking about, it's all right. It's all right. Just really nowhere near as good as the first one. And then I watched it a second time, like, you know what? No, it's not even all right. This is a bad movie. Kingsman the Golden Circle was a bad film, in my opinion. All film's subjective. You may like it. That's great if you do. To me, it was just a straight up bad film. And I really love the first one. And it also took a dip in the box office. Not much. Like the first one made about 418. The second one made a little over 400. It took a significant drop in the domestic box office. Like at the domestic box office, I think the first one made like 128 million. At the domestic box office, the second one made about 100 million. So it took about a 22% drop domestically at any rate. But the bigger issue here is that the second one was not good. I did not like the direction that Matthew Vaughn went with it. It just felt too cornball. And there's definitely a cornball-ness to the first one as well, but it was in moderation. The second one just felt stupid and dumb and made no sense, and I just couldn't get into it at all. And one of the biggest wastes was The Statesman. So I find it very odd that the second film comes out and it's poor, doesn't do as well at the box office as the first one, and now they're talking about a part 3, a television series, and a spin-off Statesman movie. That's, it's weird. I mean, it just feels weird to me. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. Again, I'll be all for seeing a new Kick-Ass or Hit Girl films. I just don't think it makes any business sense, but as a fan, I'm excited to see them. And I just don't see how this makes any sense for Kingsman either. Now, this could be one of these long lists in the grand storied history of Hollywood of directors talking about movies they're doing that never actually get greenlit, never actually happen. That could be the case here. None of this may actually happen. Just because Matthew Vaughn's talking about it doesn't mean it's going to happen. But we're going to have to wait and see. All right, guys, whole bunch of other stuff going on in the world of movie news. So let's get you caught up right now with the movie news feed. First up, we've been talking about the upcoming Quentin Tarantino film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a lot lately, and yesterday, the already packed all-star cast added another legendary name. According to reports, Al Pacino has joined the cast. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood takes place during the height of hippie Hollywood and centers around Rick Dalton, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, former star of a Western TV series, and his longtime stunt double, Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt. Both are struggling to make it in a Hollywood they don't recognize anymore, but Rick has a very famous next-door neighbor, Sharon Tate, played by Margot Robbie. Pacino will play Marvin Schwartz, the agent of Leonardo DiCaprio's character in the film. This film is just straight up getting absolutely ridiculous. Okay, Leonardo DiCaprio, Margot Robbie, Brad Pitt, now you're adding Al Pacino. On top of all that, you've got characters like Kurt Russell, Luke Perry just joined, Dakota Fanning, Tim Roth, Burt Reynolds, Clifton Collins Jr. I mean, this is an impressive looking cast to say the least. And of course, the story is interesting. Now, we talked about this the other day too. Some people are mistakenly thinking this is a movie about the Manson murders. It's not, but the Manson murders do serve as the background of this. What kind of strings Quentin Tarantino's pulling this kind of a cast together is just off the charts. Now, there's not many movies that I'd go see that movie just for the cast, but holy crap, this is becoming one of the most stacked casts in film history, and I just can't wait to see what Tarantino has in mind for it. Next up, a few days ago, we talked about the first official images for the upcoming Drew Goddard directed film, Bad Times at the El Royale, and now the first official trailer has landed online. Bad Times at the El Royale is said to take place in the 1960s at a rundown hotel centering on a cast of characters whose own shady agendas will violently collide. 7 strangers, each with a secret to bury, meet at Lake Tahoe's El Royale, a rundown hotel with a dark past. Over the course of one fateful night, everyone will have a last shot at redemption, before everything goes right to hell. The film stars John Hamm, Jeff Bridges, Chris Hemsworth, Dakota Johnson, and Nick Offerman. The film opens in theaters on October 5th. You know, when the first official images for this movie dropped, I said, after looking at the pictures and reading the description, I said, this has got like a Quentin Tarantino sort of feel to it. Of course, Drew Goddard doing it. And it's amazing to think that Drew Goddard hasn't directed a film since Cabin in the Woods. Like, that's just kind of crazy to think about. But when we saw the images, I said, yeah, it feels a little bit like a Quentin Tarantino film. After watching the trailer, it does 2 things. Number one, it really feels like a Quentin Tarantino film, but it also really feels like Cabin in the Woods. It feels like what Cabin in the Woods might have felt like had Quentin Tarantino directed it. And it's got this crazy, bonkers kind of idea where you got all these characters who look like one thing at the surface, but then as the trailer progresses, you realize nothing is as it seems. There's all these twisted secrets. It's got just this awesome feel about it. Like, the flavor of this movie is unbelievable. Like, look, I was curious about this movie before. Absolutely, I was curious about it. But oh my God, it's got to be in my top 10. Probably, yeah. I'll say it's in my top 10 most anticipated films for the rest of the year now. This thing looks crazy, bonkers, fresh, original, all that kind of stuff. Drew Goddard directing. Put on all this cast in there as well. This thing looks like a winner to me. I can't wait to see it. Next up, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom may not open up here domestically until June 22nd, but the dinosaur movie and latest installment of the Jurassic Park franchise has already opened in a bunch of overseas markets, and it's seeing strong results. From Variety, in South Korea, the film broke the Avengers Infinity War opening day box office record and is posting strong results in other markets as well, which seems to position the film to hit those tracking numbers of $140 to $150 million opening weekend when it finally hits here in North America. And you know, I put up my review of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom the other day. You can find it on my YouTube channel right now. And I believe it's the second best Jurassic film we've had so far. Now, clearly, it doesn't recapture the magic of the first film. That's a very, very tall order, and certainly it doesn't do that. But it is a good, fun, summer, giant dinosaur kind of movie. I mean, what else are we expecting from a giant dinosaur movie? But that's what it delivers. Now, I think there's going to be some people tempted to say, oh my gosh, $140 and $150 million opening weekend. That's so disappointing when you look at how big the first one opened. Yeah, but the first one really overachieved. Like even the studio thought the first one massively overachieved. If this one can still open about $140, $150 million, I think Universal takes that as a huge win. That's actually right around where initial projections kind of thought the first one would open at. Now, I've been saying I didn't like the looks of the trailers to this one. To be honest with you, the trailers for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom did this movie absolutely no favors. You know, I always say that the job of a trailer is to raise your excitement level wherever your excitement level is. The Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom marketing did nothing to increase my anticipation of it, but I still didn't doubt it because I learned after the last film you shouldn't doubt it. I think it will cross that $140, $150 million range, and I think the results we're seeing in the international markets will kind of reflect that as well. So we'll have to wait and see. We still got a few weeks to go, though. And finally, the long overdue Pixar sequel, Incredibles 2, is hitting theaters on June 15th, and according to online ticket sales giant Fandango, the film is on pace to become the company's biggest pre-ticket sales animated film of all time, moving past Finding Dory, another Pixar film. Fandango said the following: "Fans have been waiting over a decade to see the return of Pixar's most beloved heroic family, and those years of anticipation are leading to record-breaking advance ticket sales for Incredibles 2. Now, these are all wonderful numbers to hear about Incredibles 2 and the pre-ticket sales and all that kind of stuff. However, there are two things we need to keep in mind here. Thing number one is this, is that, you know, as time progresses, buying tickets online in advance is becoming more and more popular. It seems almost exponentially it's growing week after week. It seems like every week there's a new film breaking pre-ticket sales advance records on Fandango and all that kind of stuff. Because more and more people are adapting to using online ticket sales. And there's still a whole bunch of people out there who don't. But over the next couple of years, we're going to see these records broken dozens of times as more and more people adopt using this method of buying their tickets in advance. Therefore, like today, a whole lot more people are buying tickets in advance on online sites like Fandango or Atom Tickets than they were back when Finding Dory was coming out, so it's not really that big a surprise. The second thing we need to keep in mind is this. Let's not forget that just a little while ago, Fandango announced, rightfully so, that Solo, a Star Wars story, more than doubled the amount of pre-sales tickets it sold in its first day than Black Panther did. Now, that's true. It's a fact. It did. But that didn't ultimately lead to Solo, a Star Wars story, having a massive opening weekend. As a matter of fact, it fell by less than half of what Black Panther made at the box office, even though it kind of doubled its sales on the first day pre-advance tickets. So one thing does not necessarily equate the other. We've seen that prove itself out over and over again. But still, there's no denying. Incredibles 2 is a highly anticipated movie that everybody's excited about. We talked on the show yesterday about how the first reactions to the film, they've done a couple of screenings already. I'm seeing the movie on Saturday, but they've already done a couple of screenings, and the reactions have been really, really strong, which is good to see. It doesn't mean everybody's going to like it, but it's at least a positive thing to see. I'm hearing good things. Everybody's excited about seeing it. So while it may or may not break all these records, there's no denying Incredibles 2 is going to do really well at the box office. And that'll do it for today's installment of the Movie News Feed. And now you are all caught up to date on all the stuff going on in the world of movie news. So let's now go into our main topics. What are our main topics? Our main topics are submitted by you guys. How do you get a topic or a question on the John Campea Show? It's simple. You just email me anytime at john@thejohncampeashow.com. Put the word topic in the subject line and keep your emails to 90 words or less. Once again, email me anytime, guys, with your topics or questions at john@thejohncampeashow.com. Put the word topic in the subject line and keep those emails to 90 words or less. All right, let's get things going here with the first topic. And the first emailed in topic today comes to us from our Patreon supporter, Adam Barnes, who writes, "Hey, John. I'm really looking forward to the live-action Mulan movie, My question is, do you think there's a chance Disney will go for a PG-13 rating, given that the story revolves around a war? The original was fantastic, but a more realistic take on Mulan might play better in a live-action film and help to differentiate it from the animated movie. Well, I mean, it's an interesting question, Adam. Like, first of all, I don't know if they need to differentiate it from the animated movie. I mean, the animated movie was forever ago, so I'm not sure they have any kind of need to do that. I love these sidebars Ray makes. Anyway, you know what's interesting is that let's look at a recent Disney movie, Jungle Book, right? What do you think Jungle Book was rated? I was getting ready to say, like, when I looked at this email earlier this morning, I thought, well, one of the points I'm going to raise is, well, like, hey, why wouldn't they do PG-13? They did Jungle Book PG-13, and I thought, you know, I'll just double check that. Jungle Book was PG. And there's a lot of scary and some violent stuff in Jungle Book. I was honestly quite surprised to see that Jungle Book got a PG. And to me, if you can do that movie and that's PG, because I would have swore that Jungle Book would have been a PG-13. I really would have thought that. But if that's a PG, you might be able to do it. I would say this. Being a war movie, it may just by nature end up being PG-13. Like, I don't think Disney's going to go for a PG-13. I think Disney's just going to make their movie, make sure it's nothing R-rated, and then if the MPA board gives it a PG or PG-13, I don't really think they'll care. I think they'll be perfectly fine if they get a PG-13. I think they'll be perfectly fine if they get a PG, but I don't think Disney is like aiming for a PG or aiming for a PG-13. I think they're just going to put their movie together, making sure it's not rated R stuff, and then just submit it to the MPAA, and the MPAA will give it a rating, and I don't really think Disney's going to care all that much if it's a PG or PG-13. So I don't think they're going for a PG-13, but I certainly wouldn't doubt it because, as you pointed out, this is a war film. I wouldn't doubt it at all if it does end up getting a PG-13. All right, let's move on to the next topic. And the next one today gets to submit it to us from the World of S, who writes, "Hey, John, how's your day? My day's going pretty good, thank you so much. I'm a little worried about Mission Impossible Fallout at the box office. It seems that in the last 2 years, a July tentpole sequels, Star Trek Beyond and War for the Planet of the Apes, underperformed. I think the movie will be great, but those two films make me question if this will have a similar fate. Thanks." Well, I think one of the things you got to keep in mind, World, is there's a couple of extenuating circumstances, right? Extenuating circumstance number one for the Star Trek thing, it was coming off the previous Star Trek film, Into Darkness, which I liked, but a lot of people didn't. And let's not forget that first Star Trek Into Darkness trailer, or that first Star Trek Beyond trailer, was terrible. The first trailer, do you guys remember they used the Sabotage tune from Beastie Boys that felt completely out of place with the trailer? Like, it's funny because in the movie, they used the Sabotage Beastie Boys tune, and in context, it worked great. But out of context, in the first trailer, it was a bloody mess. It was a terrible first trailer, and it was coming off of one of the most easily the least popular of all the Star Trek films since the JJ era started. So that turned a lot of people off. So there was that. With War for the Planet of the Apes, yeah, but remember, War for the Planet of the Apes, for some inexplicable reason, decided to open on Spider-Man Homecoming's second weekend. So that hurt Spider-Man Homecoming second weekend, because remember, Spider-Man Homecoming took like a 60 or 65% drop, but it also killed War for the Planet of the Apes, because I think War for the Planet of the Apes only ended up making like $50 million or something like that on its opening weekend, somewhere in that neighborhood. Like way below what we would have thought it would have made. So there are some extenuating circumstances. Also, I'd say be really careful to pick out 2 or 3 films and try to see a pattern in just 2 or 3 films. Because the amount of films that open in July over the past 10 years, you know, is a huge number. So I'd be hesitant to just pick 2 or 3 films and try to recognize a pattern in there, if you know what I'm saying. However, there is an argument to be made that Avengers Infinity War open. And already we've had, this season we've had Ready Player One, we've had Avengers Infinity War, we've had Solo, we've had Deadpool, we've all these things that So there's a lot of people in the average movie-going public don't go to see 5 movies in a 2-month period, right? Most average filmgoers do not go to 5 movies in 2 months. And so there's been this growing argument that I'm starting to buy into a little bit that, hey, the average filmgoer, they just drop money to go see, Avengers Infinity War and Deadpool, and they're not going to go back to a movie again for a little while. There's an argument to be made for that. And maybe there's this thing going where as these movies get pushed earlier and earlier, that by the time we get to July, there may be a bunch of people that think like, hey man, I've already gone to the theater like 3 times in the past 6 or 7 weeks, which is more than I normally go. So I'm just going to have to wait. So there are arguments to be made for that. But again, I wouldn't jump to any conclusions. There were extenuating circumstances both for Beyond and for War of the Planet of the Apes. You don't want to look for patterns in just a small number of movies, but there is an argument to be made for it. So it'll be really interesting to see how this Mission Impossible works out. It's not going to be a $2 billion movie by any stretch of it. It doesn't even need to be a $1 billion film, not at all. But this movie looks awesome. So let's see what kind of response it ultimately gets. All right, final email question of the day comes to us from David Dagnino, who writes, I don't want Penguin in my DCEU movies because I really love the Penguin in Gotham. And DC always kills off the best characters from the TV shows when writing them into crappy movies. Well, first of all, let me make you feel better here, David. The next season of Gotham is the final season anyway. I mean, they've made that public knowledge. Next season of Gotham is the final season. So I wouldn't worry about what they do to Penguin because that show's ending anyway. It does raise a bigger topic though. And that topic is this. I have always applauded, because I believe that one of the things that Warner Brothers has done with their DCEU better than what Marvel has done is that they keep their television universe and their movie universe separate from each other. I applaud that. That is the way to go. You give your television showrunners far more freedom, far more creative freedom when they're not handcuffed to whatever's going on in your cinematic universe. That's something that I think Marvel should learn from DC. As a matter of fact, I think they have been learning it because they basically keep their Netflix series separate. Technically, they're in the same universe, but for all practical implications, they're kept completely separate. That is one of the things Warner Brothers has done right. But let me ask this question. So then what happens is, one of the best characters the DCCW universe has, the television side has, is their Deathstroke character, who's portrayed by Manu Bennett, right? Manu Bennett played Deathstroke, probably the best character they've got in all of the DC shows on CW. He's the best character. And they just brought him back in this previous season, and his story arc was great. He's a badass character, all that kind of stuff. But then what happens? Joe Manganiello, who's awesome, big Dungeons and Dragons player, by the way, Joe is, they bring him in that post-credit scene of Justice League. And Warner Brothers sends down this edict to CW, you can't use Deathstroke anymore because we're going to use him in the movies. Isn't that the freaking point of having 2 separate universes? What's the point of keeping your television and your movie universes separate if you're going to bring in one character in the movie universe and they go, oh, TV universe, you can't use this character anymore? Why the hell not? Like, I get it with Batman because Batman's your most prized, valuable possession. You want to keep a very close eye on Batman. You want to protect that IP. You want to protect that. You don't want to stretch it too thin. I get it. That's fine. But what is the point of keeping your movie and television universes separate if you're going to say, oh, now that we're using this in the movie, we can't use it in the TV series? How does that make any sense whatsoever? The whole point of keeping it separate was that both the movie makers and the TV creators can have creative freedom without worrying about what the other is doing. The movies don't have to worry about what the TV shows are doing. The TV shows don't have to worry about... That's the point. So if the movies want to use Deathstroke and the TV show wants to use Deathstroke, great. So why do... I mean, that is... And as much as I give Warner Brothers credit for keeping their universes separate, then I go, Warner Brothers, what the hell are you thinking? If you're going to keep them separate, keep them separate. You got Flash in the movies and Flash on TV. Are you saying Deathstroke's more important than Flash? I don't know. It's just a really crazy thing. But anyway, back to the main topic here. Don't worry about your Penguin, because even if they decide, well, Penguin's got to be killed off, it doesn't matter because next season is the last season of Gotham anyway. All right, guys, listen. I had a bit of a misfire when I started the show and I had to restart the whole live event. And before I restarted the live event, a bunch of people had already sent in live questions. So I'm going to get to those live questions here first. And then I'm going to get to whatever new live questions we have waiting for us, okay? All right, so Alexander Helmer had written in, watch Snowpiercer. Wow, and it's amazing. Great story. You know what? I was a little bit late to the Snowpiercer party. And I got to admit, I didn't love it. I mean, I liked it. I thought it was very creative. But it also felt a little bland to me. I don't know why. Maybe I'm crazy, but everybody else loves it. If you haven't checked it out, it's got Chris Evans in it, by the way. It's about like all of society now lives on this train that's always moving. It's kind of crazy, but most people love it. So if you haven't seen Snowpiercer, you should check it out. Because like I said, forget what I'm saying. Most other people completely love it, so you should check it out. Sam Fisher writes, Turner Classic Movies just did a Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers marathon last night. That I recorded. So guess what I'm doing after the show? That's awesome. So I have watched a whole bunch of Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. Some of that old classic stuff is so fun to just sit and watch every once in a while. I had no idea they did that marathon. So you're in for a good day. You're going to have a good day today. Sam Fisher writes, it's supposed to say marathon. Got it. Alexander Helmer writes, DiCaprio, Pitt, Robbie, Russell, Reynolds, Pacino. Oh my God. This Quentin Tarantino movie, this Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Kurt Russell, Burt Reynolds, Al Pacino, on top of others. Are you kidding me? This could be one of the most impressive ensemble casts ever, what Quentin Tarantino's putting together here. Onif STU123 writes, R.I.P. Anthony Bourdain, an inspiration to us all. It was completely sad and surprised this morning when I read about the death of Anthony Bourdain. What a lot. This dude was the bad boy rock star of the culinary world. And so tragic to hear about this. Like, so sad. Andrew Oldham writes, seeing Ocean's 8 today, but I never saw the original Clooney trilogy. Can I still go into it completely blind and still enjoy it? Yes, because there are ties to the original trilogy, and there's a few references here and there that you'll miss because you didn't see the original trilogy. But honestly, they're side notes. You can go in completely cold. All you need to know is that Deb Ocean is Danny Ocean's sister. That's George Clooney's character. That's all you need to know. And then there will be a couple of references that are going to go over your head because you didn't see it, but really not much. Overall, you're going to get the movie, no problem. It's okay. Andrew Oldham writes, also, is the original Sinatra Ocean's 11 movie worth checking out at some point? Yes, it is. But you know what's funny is because Ocean's 11, like the George Clooney incarnation of Ocean's 11, is one of the few examples where the reboot, I think, is better than the original. But yes, the original Sinatra Oceans is totally worth watching, but I think Clooney's Oceans is even better, to be honest with you. Dakota Barber writes, saw Hereditary last night, and oh boy, John, get ready. There's some truly disturbing imagery in the movie, and Toni Collette absolutely deserves an Oscar nomination. Definitely see it with the crowd. Be very careful about throwing out who deserves Oscar nominations when it's so early in the year, because for all you know, you're going to see 7 or 8 other performances between now and the end of December that are even better than Toni Collette's. So no matter how good Toni Collette is, pump the brakes on saying she deserves an Oscar nomination, because it's all relative to how the other performers do, and we haven't seen the other performances yet. But I've been hearing amazing things about Hereditary. I've been so excited to see it. I was kind of half thinking about going to see a doubleheader tonight, and one of the ones was going to be Hereditary. However, Tom Hanks is doing a live stage play tonight, and if you guys watch me, you guys know my wife is cuckoo for Tom Hanks. Like, she would leave me. If some agent said, hey, Mrs. Campea, if you leave your husband, we'll let you have a 5-minute coffee with Tom Hanks. Anne would soon be the ex-Mrs. Campea. She would leave me like that to have a 5-minute coffee with Tom Hanks. That is how dear to her heart Tom Hanks is to Anne. So anyway, Anne said to me yesterday morning as I woke up, wake up, honey. I'm like, what is it, baby? I'm like, what is it, baby? We're going out tomorrow night, which is tonight now. I'm like, where are we going? Tom Hanks is doing a stage play. Which one? Does it matter? No, honey, no, it doesn't matter. So Ann and I tonight are going to go watch Tom Hanks in a live stage play. So my plans for going to go see a doubleheader, including Hereditary tonight, went right out the window, unfortunately. But I'll probably get around to watching it this weekend, sometime in and around. I'm going to go see Incredibles tomorrow morning. I got the UFC tomorrow night, but I'm going to see if in the afternoon I can squeeze in to see Hereditary, because I'm hearing great things. Ben Heyusa writes, R.I.P. Anthony Bourdain. Jed Jensen writes, Westboro Baptist Church is visiting my town this weekend, and I'm having to pass by their protest. Should we stage a counter protest or ignore them? Oh, ignore them. These are 50 people. This is like 50 to 100 people. This isn't like 1% of the population. This is 0.0000000000000000001%. I mean, these people are nobody. And they do these protests to get attention. Like if they represented 1% of the population or 2% of the population, then I would say, yes, mount counter protests, but they're nobody. They mean nothing. And the only reason anybody even knows who their names are is because we keep talking about them, but they're an insignificant little nothing group. So I would just ignore them personally. Let's see. Rodrigo Ortiz writes, observe and report. Not the best movie, but it'll always have a special place in my heart because it was the last movie I saw with my dad before he passed away. Man, that's beautiful, actually. And you're right, Observe and Report is not that great of a movie. Probably one of the worst Seth Rogen movies. But, I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about movies, man, is that especially when they happen around something significant in our lives, like losing your dad. For instance, there's this restaurant that Ann and I were having dinner at. Hard to talk about. I got a phone call because they didn't want to call Ann directly. They thought it needed to come from me. We got the phone call that Ann's dad had passed away. And Ann and I were in a restaurant. And I got the call. And I made the decision, I'm not going to tell her this in the middle of the restaurant. So it was the toughest 15 minutes. Fortunately, we were close to the end of our dinner. But it was the toughest 15 minutes that I had to sit there with my wife. Because I didn't want her to receive this information sitting in the middle of all these people. It was the toughest 15 minutes for me trying to act like everything was great. And then we finished, we left the restaurant, we got out onto the street, and then I told her. And now, it's really weird. You think that restaurant would become an object of real pain for us, but it's not. Like it makes Ann think about her dad, which is a good thing. Like it makes Ann, now that restaurant kind of makes Ann think about her dad. And that place has now kind of become a special place for us. And movies have that same kind of power. Like I still remember the movie I watched before I made my first trip to Los Angeles. I went with my buddy and we went to go see this movie. I'm embarrassed to even say what the movie was because it was a bad movie. But we went to the Cineplex Silver City in Ancaster, Ontario, watched this horrible movie there. And then the next day I was leaving to make my first trip to Los Angeles. And I still remember that. And so, yeah. And that's funny, man. That's worth. And so for you, even though, yeah, it's a bad movie, I bet for you that movie has and always will have a very special place in your heart. And that's one of the really cool things about movies. Okay, those are all the ones. I only got a couple, like 2 or 3 minutes left here, guys. I've already gone overtime, but I will take a few minutes here to take some of the new live questions that have come in. And don't worry, guys, any of the live questions that I do not get to here, I will put over into the next companion video. By the way, I was supposed to have a companion video up this morning, recorded it, ended it, went to bed. This is why you're supposed to check your things, because there was something very wrong with my video, so I couldn't post it. So I'm going to have to redo the companion video. But now I can put in the leftover questions here. So let's get to it here. Sam Fisher. Oh, Sam resent in the same thing about Fred Astaire. Absolutely, man. Have a good time watching those things. Raymond Verrata writes, R.I.P. Anthony Bourdain, thank you for expanding our worldviews and expanding our palates. You know, I've got such a bland palate. I eat the most boring food. And yet I'm fascinated by watching Bourdain taking us around the world, introducing us to things I would never think to eat. It was really kind of crazy that way. Agalisis just sends in super chat. Thank you. Anthony C. writes, thoughts on the original Texas Chainsaw film? Gruesome. I mean, it's still shocking today. It's also kind of funny today with our modern sensibilities, but it's still like a kick to watch. D. Wathers writes, John, were you able to redeem the stream keys I sent you on the game email list? They expire if you don't redeem them. Adam Jensen writes, no, I haven't had 2 seconds to rub together to do anything like that. So I know exactly the ones you sent me, and I really appreciate they sent me, but unfortunately, I have not had time or opportunity to get around to them, and I probably won't even have time to do much until like Monday or something like that. But I really appreciate that you sent those, like a whole hell of a lot. Let's see here. Taki75 writes, John, I loved you, and then I heard you say that Superman Returns is a magnificent movie. You broke my heart. Well, I mean, Superman Returns is a great movie. It's just not a great comic book movie. And therein, when you really dig down into the people who don't like that movie, really, when they give their explanations, you can kind of boil it down to the fact that it's not a very good comic book movie. Like, as a character study movie, I think it's fantastic. You know, one of the things that Bryan Singer explored was how isolated, how alone, how kind of like blocked off from the rest of the world this God-man would be. And he did something with that movie to dive in there and really explore the character of Superman as opposed to the action of Superman, right? Now, that is the movie's greatest strength, but that also leads us into what the movie's greatest weakness was that it was a terrible action movie. There's no action. And if you're going to do a big comic book movie today with the king of all superhero movies, you have to include those elements into your film if you're going to satisfy the audience. And I think a lot of the audience, understandably so, went in and were left kind of unsatisfied because, you know, the biggest fight is Superman lifting a plane. I mean, that's the biggest action we see. And it's and that's where it failed. But if you look beyond it as a comic book movie, as a character study movie, I thought it was really smart. I thought it was a really smart movie as a character study movie. Unfortunately, it failed as a comic book movie, and I think that's why a lot of people have different problems with it. History Soup writes, shouldn't Warner Brothers put Berlanti in charge of the put Berlanti in charge of the DCU? Oh, God, no. God, no. Look, as much as I'm a fan of some of Arrow, and as much as I'm a fan of a lot of Flash, not so much this last season, but a lot of Flash, and as much as I'm a fan of Black Lightning, those work great because we approach them. I'll speak for myself. I approach them with my head in a certain mind space that I'm watching a cheesy CW show. When you go into it with that mindset and you tune your head to that frequency, then you can watch these shows and go, yeah, these are fun. These are great. I like these things, blah, blah, blah. But if you try to pass off any of the schlock that they do on CW, and I enjoy that schlock, by the way, but if you try to pass that off on the big screen as epic feature films, you will be laughed out of the city. So no, as much as I appreciate very much what they're doing with their CW Hero Universe, very much on that level, my God, no, this guy is not the guy to be in charge of the DCEU. No. And if the DCEU films felt anything like the CW shows, people would riot. I mean, so no, I disagree with the history soup. I mean, if you want that, that's awesome. More power to you. Don't change your opinion. But if you're asking me for my opinion is, oh my God, no, don't do that. All right, final question I'm going to take today, and then the rest of these questions that are waiting here, I will put over into the next companion video. Justin Luchak writes, do you think Thanos' character and the movie as a whole would have benefited from putting his backstory in? I know they had cut it before filming. I think a Man of Steel-esque opening would have been awesome. No. Look, because if you'd put that in, you would have had to have cut something else out. Did the movie do just fine without those scenes? Yeah, it did just fine without the scenes. Would it have benefited? Sure. But you can come up with an hour and a half of other material that also would have benefited the film. But at some point, you got to say, Where do we draw a line? The movie was already 2.5 hours long, right? Where do you draw the line? Because we could sit here all day and come up with 1 or 2 extra hours of stuff that we think the movie could have benefited from. Sure, you can do that. That's why editing is such a huge, important thing in movies. But honestly, the movie didn't feel like it was lacking something by not having the backstory. The one scene I would have liked to have had was one scene where Gamora and Thanos actually shared affection from the like a flashback to just once that they shared affection to justify that Gamora cried when she thought she killed Thanos. Like, it would have been nice to have one little flashback scene to justify her emotions in that moment. But even then, I can understand why they didn't. You can keep adding and adding and adding and adding all you want, but at some point you got to start measuring out bang for your buck. And I think keeping it at 2.5 hours and not going much over that served the film well. It was still an overcrowded movie. And that's one of my criticisms of Infinity War. It was overcrowded. They did put in too many characters. They had too much going on. They found a way to make it work, but it would have worked better if they had thinned out the movie a little bit. But anyway, that's just kind of my opinion on it. All right, guys, that will do it for today's installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you so much for joining me. And listen, guys, don't forget, if you guys enjoy my programming and like watching my shows, do me a favor. Just head over to www.patreon.com/John Campea. Get all the information about what it means to be a Patreon supporter, how being a Patreon supporter keeps these shows on the air, and also what benefits there are to being a Patreon supporter, like audio-only versions of the show. Star Wars Talk is now exclusively a Patreon show that we do on the Patreon Facebook page. You get access to that Facebook page and a few other things more. Do me a favor, check out that website, and maybe you'll become a Patreon supporter too, which would be awesome if you did. And if you don't, no problem. I'm just happy and grateful that you're here being a film fan with us. All right, guys, that will do it for me for today. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until our next video, bye-bye.